and repeat after me. I am, call your name, beautifully made, wonderfully made, blessed by the hands of God, and I, call your name, can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You are beautiful despite the scars, despite the constant degradation. You are worthy.
I realized
I lost myself in this man.
that if I didn't leave, you would have killed me too.
It took my self-esteem. I felt like nobody else would want me. He told me I was so ugly, and I believed him after a while. I lost everything. He led me to believe that I was the cause of it, when in fact he was. I lost my self-worth, but I took it back.
Yes.
I took it back.
Yes, I did.
I lost everything in this man, but I took it back. Yes, I took it back.
Victory. That's what I hear at the end. Victory. I took it back, but I took it back. I want to welcome Dennis Archer to the program this evening. Valina Ali. Good evening to you guys, and I'm sorry that you did not get a chance to hear what was going on YouTube before. I am so sorry. I apologize. All right. So I'm glad that it's on now. And you can now hear us. Oh, ay, ay, ay. Every minute they change something. All right. Thank you so much. I want to welcome again Dennis Archer to the program. Thank you for tuning in, Dennis. Valina Ali. Thank you for tuning in. Andrea Chana, Marcia Robb, Nicole Williams, Tara Ramsamouj. How are you doing, Tara? Welcome to the program this evening. Evelyn Butler, I see you. Good evening. I hear Claudette saying this testimony brings her to tears whenever she hears it. Wow. It's a matter near and dear to the heart. Josephine, good evening to you, Josephine Lusac Nije. Good evening. I don't know. I hope I didn't butcher your name. Good evening to you, my sis. Marva Glasgow, my namesake. Good evening and welcome, welcome. And Claudia reporting, it's now on YouTube. I just had to click one button and I don't know. It's a change. I never had to do that before. Anyways, to God be the glory. We're now on. Rohanna Maynard, good evening to you and thank you so much for coming on board with us this evening. Let's get into our book. Why does he do that?
I just the mercies of God. You don't understand?
If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. I was a bad man I wrote, but to
That's the book we're discussing. Real talk. Why does he do that? Inside the minds of angry and controlling men. And this book is written by Lundy Bancroft. And let me tell you a little bit more about Lundy for those who are new with us. Lundy Bancroft has spent the last 15 years of his career specializing in domestic abuse and the behavior of abusive men. He is the author of When Dad Hurts Mom and The Batterer as Parent, as well as several articles for the New England Journal of Medicine and other professional publications. He is the former co-director of Emerge. And what is Emerge? Emerge is the nation's first program for abusive men. Yes, the first program for abusive men. Mr. Bancroft now practices in the state of Massachusetts while he trains various state agencies and judicial agencies in dealing with domestic abuse situations. So he has the knowledge. He has first-hand knowledge, not just me who get book knowledge on this matter, but he's worked with these abusive men. And again, the program is not addressing every man in the world tonight. It's only for the abusive man. Mr. Lundy went down deep to let us in on what goes on inside the minds of angry and controlling men. So if you were with us last week, we left off on page 64. Where's my highlighter? Oh, I got it right here. Okay. On page 65, rather, reality number 6. We did reality number 5, and so we are going on reality number 6. And if you got to catch up, then you got to do that, all right? But we're just going to pick up from here. Now, let me see if I can quickly mention them. He gave us some realities about the abuser, and we covered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're going. Oh, okay, so the chapter is entitled "The Abusive Mentality." The abusive mentality. All right, don't forget that's where we are. And reality number 6. Can we just begin? He is manipulative. He's manipulative. And Mr. Lundy says, let's examine the following interactions between an abusive man named David and his partner, Joanne. All right, so here's a scenario. David is yelling at Joanne, pointing his finger and turning red in the face. Joanne tells him he's too angry, and she doesn't like it. He yells even louder, saying, "I'm not angry. I'm just trying to get my point across, and you're not listening. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. I hate that. You're not inside me." One day, Joanne tells David that his outbursts are getting to her and she needs to take some time off from their relationship. David says, "What you're saying is that you don't love me anymore." "I'm not sure you ever loved me. You don't understand how strong my feelings are for you." And he looks close to tears. The conversation shifts to Joanne reassuring David that she is not abandoning him, and her complaints about his behavior gets lost in the shuffle. Wow. On another occasion, Joanne brings up the fact that she would like to go back to school. David responds negatively, saying, "We can't afford it," and refuses to look after the children while she's at class. Joanne proposes a number of strategies for dealing with both money and childcare, all of which David finds something wrong with. Joanne finally decides it's impossible to continue her education, but David then insists that he wasn't trying to talk her out of it. She winds up feeling that the decision not to go back to school is her own. Wow. Wow. Look at that. Wow. Oh my God. Few abusive men rely entirely on verbal abuse or intimidation to control their partners. Being a nonstop bully is too much work, and it makes the man look bad. If he is abusive all the time, his partner starts to recognize that she's been abused, and the man may feel too guilty about his behavior. The abuser, therefore, tends to switch frequently to manipulating his partner to get what he wants. He may also sometimes use these tactics just to get her upset or confused. Whew. There are some signs of manipulation by abusers that you can watch for. Here are some of them. He lists like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them. Let's talk about them. Oh, Lordy, this book is getting hot.
It's the mercies of God. You don't understand? Psycho.
If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. I was a bad man I wrote, but to Jesus me weep. If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. Me have a big smile I roll, but at night time me weep. Sometimes me no want to wake up, to me feel like my life a waste. It's like every door me knock on, them a slam them in my face.
All right, Mr. Lundy says there are some signs of manipulation by abusers that you can watch for. Good evening, Julia McDougall. How are you? She says, great to be able to connect after a few months away. I'm so grateful that you're here. Thank you so much. Sister Dacia, happy Sabbath to you. She says, real talk. Abuse is real And with this pandemic, it's on the rise. Thank you. Marcia says, good evening, Doc, and all back on it for Real Talk. Thank you. Good evening, Miss Grace. Thanks, Rohanna, Claudette, Evelyn. Thank you so much. Velma Strawn, happy Sabbath. Welcome, Lady CC. Thank you, guys, and Nicole Williams for being here. Jackie Paisley, good evening to you and all the folks that are on Facebook. All right, let's talk about these. See if you can identify with them, all right? Some ways, some signs of manipulation by abusers that we can watch out for. One, changing his moods abruptly and frequently, so that you find it difficult to tell who he is or how he feels, keeping you constantly off balance. His feelings toward you are especially changeable. Can we go to the next one? Denying the obvious about what he's doing or feeling. He'll speak to you with his voice trembling with anger, or he'll blame a difficulty on you, or he'll sulk for 2 hours and then deny it to your face. You know what he did, and so does he. But he refuses to admit it, which can drive you crazy with frustration. Then he may call you irrational for getting so upset by his denial. Wow. Then here comes another one. Convincing you that what he wants you to do is what is best for you. Oh, my God. Listen to me. Mr. Lundy knows exactly what he's talking about. Good day to you, Spirit. I sent a good day greeting out to you. You're at work. Good day. Mr. Lundy knows exactly what he's talking about. Okay? Wow. Wow. I'm telling you, I wish I had this book some years ago. Oh, my God. But thanks be to God. Some things you just have to experience, you know? So here it is. Convincing you that what he wants you to do is what is best for you. This way, the abuser can make his selfishness look like generosity, which is a neat trick. A long time may pass before you realize what his real motives were. Yes. Amen. Amen. The next one is getting you to feel sorry for him so that you will be reluctant to push forward with your complaints about what he does. The next one is getting you to blame yourself or blame other people for what he does. The next one is using confusion tactics in arguments, subtly or overtly changing the subject, insisting that you are thinking or feeling things that you are not, twisting your words, and many other tactics that serve as glue to pour into your brain. You may leave arguments with him feeling like you are losing your mind. Oh my God. Oh, wow. The next one is lying or misleading you about his actions, his desires, or his reasons for doing certain things in order to guide you into doing what he wants you to do. One of the most frequent complaints I get from abused women is that their partners lie repeatedly, a form of psychological abuse that in itself can be highly destructive over time. And then the last sign, getting you and the people you care about turned against each other by betraying confidences, being rude to your friends, telling people lies about what you supposedly said about them, charming your friends, and then telling them bad things about you, and many other divisive tactics. Lord have mercy. This book, maybe I couldn't have gotten it earlier, really, because I would not be able to identify with the things that this book is talking about. Maybe I'd just read it and it would just go through, one place and just get out of my mind. But like being able to identify with so many things in this book, it is a whole different level. Pardon me, all right? Wow. This man knows what he's talking about. These abusers, they know exactly what they're doing. Amazing. Wow. All right, let's continue. We are on page 67. And let's get to the last paragraph. Page 67. In some ways, manipulation is worse than overt abuse, especially when the two are mixed together. When a woman gets called the B word or gets shoved or slapped, she at least knows what her partner did to her. But after a manipulative interaction, she may have little idea what went wrong. She just knows that she feels terrible or crazy, and that somehow it seems to be her own fault. This is true. Now, reality number 7, he strives to have a good public image. Reality number 7, he strives to have a good public image. If you are involved with an abusive man, you may spend a lot of your time trying to figure out what is wrong with you rather than what is wrong with him. If he gets along well with other people and impresses them with his generosity, sense of humor, and friendliness, you may wind up wondering, what is it about me that sets him off? Other people seem to think he's great. So here comes question number 5. How come everyone else thinks he's wonderful? Mr. Lundy writes, most abusive men put on a charming face for their communities, creating a sharp split between their public image and their private treatment of women and children. Amen to that. Amen to that. Now we move on. He may be, 1, enraged at home, but calm and smiling outside. Oh, yes. 2, he may be selfish and self-centered with you, but generous and supportive with others. Amen. He may be domineering at home, but willing to negotiate and compromise outside. You wonder if it's the same person, He may be highly negative about females while on his own turf, but a vocal supporter of equality when anyone else is listening. Ooh. He may be assaultive towards his partner or children, but non-violent and non-threatening with everyone else. He may be entitled at home, but critical of other men who disrespect or assault women. Yes. The pain of this contrast can eat away at a woman. In the morning, her partner cuts her. Or let me say that again. The pain of this contrast can eat away at a woman. In the morning, her partner cuts her to the quick by calling her a brainless fat cow. But a few hours later, she sees him laughing with people next door and helping them fix their car. Later, the neighbor says to her, your partner is so nice. You're lucky to be with him. A lot of men wouldn't do what he does. She responds with a mumbled, yeah, feeling confused and tongue-tied. Back at home, she asks herself over and over again, why me? The subheading, do abusive men have split personalities? He addresses that. Not really. They're drawn to power, and control. And part of how they get it is by looking good in public. The abusive man's charm makes his partner reluctant to reach out for support or assistance because she feels that people will find her revelations hard to believe or will blame her. That's why some women keep quiet, because the person that she's going to talk about is not the person that everybody else knows. He's different. Wow. She's reluctant to reach out for support or assistance because she feels that people will find her revelations hard to believe or will blame her. If friends overhear him say something abusive or police arrest him for an assault, his previous people pleasing lays the groundwork to get him off the hook. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The observers think he's such a nice guy. He's just not the type to be abusive. She must have really hurt him. The abuser's nice guy front helps him feel good about himself. My clients say to me, quote, I get along fine with everyone but her. You should ask around what I'm like. You'll see. I'm a calm, reasonable person. People can see that she's the one who goes off. End quote. Meanwhile, he uses the difficulties that she's having in her relationship with people, many of which may be caused by him, as further proof that she's the one with the problem. Boy, this book is really sweet. It is really sweet. Oh my God, this book is really sweet. All I need now is some grape nut ice cream with it. Oh, Josephine, good evening. She says, narcissistic flying monkeys. What a welcome, my sister, Rose Thomas. How are you? Good evening, Rose. She says, good evening, Dr. Monica and all our lovely listeners. And Esther Brand says, good evening, Esther. Dr. Monica, you look just beautiful. God bless you and your husband abundantly. Amen. I'll take that blessing for myself. I don't have a husband, so to God be the glory. I'll take it all for me, Esther. Thank you. Beast Michael saying, a pleasant evening. Thank you so much. Claudette says, sounds like a real troublemaker right there. Claudette, I'm telling you. And that's why I always preach to women. I say, women, I hear Rose says, I'm telling you, sounds very interesting. This book needs to be a movie. That's why I say to women all the time, women, be kind to each other. We are all we've got. We're all we've got. We have some very nice men, wonderful men. And they're not the ones that this book is about this evening. They're not perfect, but they're not abusers. That's not who we're talking about this evening. This book is written about abusive men. That's what it is about. Not abusive women, but abusive men. These are the people that he's worked with. And just reading this book this evening is like, whew. This man is hitting every nail on its head. And that's why I say, women, please, let me share it for you. There it goes on the screen. Women, please be nice to other women because you don't know what the man is telling her. Women, please be kind to other women because you don't know if you are getting the truth about the situation. We read it in the book. Some of them, they lie. Some of us, we see other women and we're quick to tear them down. We're quick to say stuff about them. Remember that you are a woman too. We are all we've got. And these abusers, they know that women are against women so much so that it doesn't take anything for him to set her against another woman. I'm reading all these things and I'm going down the list, and there's so many of them that I can identify with, so many of them. And I'm laughing like, oh my God, this and this and this and this. And I know you're out there this evening and there's so much or one and two things in this book that you can identify with. You're like, wow, that is true. That is true. This man, Lundy Bancroft, he knows what he's saying. He really knows it. And this is not a one-off that it happens with just one man or 1 out of 100. He's talking about the commonality. Abusers, these are things that they have in common. All right, let's continue. You know, every now and then I got to take a break and get my composure because this book is so real. I mean, real to me. It is so real. So here we go. Do abusive men have split personality? And that's what we're talking about on the subheading right here. So, let me pick up here. One of the most important challenges facing a counselor of abusive men. Good evening, Snap McCall. Come on in. One of the most important challenges facing a counselor of abusive men is to resist being drawn in by the men's charming persona. And when I tell you they can be charming, they can be real charming. As they sit chatting and joking in their group meeting, cruelty and selfishness seems far away. I find myself wondering the same thing the neighbors do. Could this guy really get that mean? And even after he admits to what he does, it's still hard to believe. This contrast is a key reason why abusers can get away with what they do. Among my clients, I have had numerous doctors, including 2 surgeons, many successful business people, including owners and directors of large companies, about a dozen college professors, several lawyers, a prominent and very mellow-sounding radio personality, clergy people, and 2 well-known professional athletes. This man has seen it. Did you hear the caliber of people that he's had in his sessions? Oh, he said numerous doctors, including 2 surgeons. He's talking about medical doctors, including 2 surgeons. Many successful business people, including owners and directors of large companies. About a dozen college professors. Several lawyers. A prominent and very mellow sounding radio personality. Clergy people and 2 well-known professional athletes. He goes on to write, he says, one of my violent clients had spent every Thanksgiving for the past 10 years volunteering at his local soup kitchen. Another was a publicly visible staff member of a major international human rights organization. The cruelty and destructiveness that these men were capable of would have stunned their communities had they known. Although these men usually keep their abusive side well hidden outside of the home, there is one situation in which it slips out. When someone confronts them about their abusiveness and sticks up for the abused woman, which happens to be my job. Suddenly, the attitudes and tactics they normally reserve for home come pouring out. The vast majority of women who say that they're being abused are telling the truth. I know this to be true because the abusers let their guard down with me, belying their denial. So they know that they're abusing the woman. And so they let their guards down with the author of this book. As a matter of fact, they didn't do it and then he went and wrote a book afterwards. They were placed in his program. Let's get on. Reality number 8. He feels justified. Several years ago, I had a client who began his first group session by declaring, quote, I am here because I'm a batterer, end quote. I was impressed with his ownership of his problem. However, the next week he softened his words to, I'm here because I'm abusive. And the third week he stated, I'm in the program because my wife thinks I'm abusive, end quote. Within a few more weeks, he had quit coming, having comfortably wrapped himself back up in his justifications. Abusers externalize responsibility for their actions, believing that their partners make them behave in abusive ways. Each of my clients predictably uses some variation of the following lines. Here we go. 1, she knows how to push my buttons. 2, she wanted me to go off and she knows how to make it happen. 3, she pushed me too far. 4, there's only so much a man can take. And lastly, you expect me to just let her walk all over me? What would you do? Many clients express guilt or remorse when they first begin attending counseling. But as soon as I start to press them to look at their histories of abusive behavior, they switch back to defending their actions. They don't mind glibly saying, I know what I did was wrong, end quote. But when I ask them to describe their verbal or physical assaults in detail, they leap back to justifying. Good evening, Norma. Good evening, Marcel Spain. She says all caliber of men are abusers. Look at that. Continuing, he writes, abusive men are masters of excuse making. Here comes my highlighter. One moment there.
Just the mercies of God. You don't understand? Psycho.
If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. I was a bad man I wrote, but to Jesus me weep. If my pillow...
Let me read that again. Abusive men. We're on page 71. Very top of the book there. Abusive men are masters of excuse making. In this respect, they are like substance abusers who believe that everyone and everything except them is responsible for their actions. I got to highlight this too. When they are not blaming their partners, they blame stress, alcohol, their childhood, their children, their bosses, or their insecurities. More important, they feel entitled to make these excuses. When I point out that other men under the same pressures choose not to be abusive, they tend to become irate or contemptuous. Does this mean that abusers are psychopaths who lack any conscience that could cause them to feel guilt or responsibility? Generally not. Although I have had a small number, perhaps 5% of my clients, who are. Most abusers do have a conscience about their behavior outside of the family. They may be willing to be answerable for their actions at work, at the club, or on the street. At home, however, their sense of entitlement takes over. The abusive man commonly believes he can blame his partner for anything that goes wrong, not just his abusiveness. Did he just suffer a disappointment? She caused it. Is he embarrassed by a mistake he made? She should have prevented it. Is one of the children in a difficult period? She's a bad mother. Everything is someone else's fault, and someone else is usually her. Reality number 9. Abusers deny and minimize their abuse. One of my areas of specialization is court-related work involving abusers who are physically violent or who abuse their children. I frequently encounter court personnel who say, quote, well, she accuses him of abusing her, but he denies it, end quote. They then drop the matter as if the man's denial closes the case. They also tell me, quote, he says she does the same things to him, so I guess they abuse each other, end quote. This kind of denial and cross-accusation tells us nothing about whether the woman is telling the truth. If the man is abusive, of course, he is going to deny it, partly to protect himself and partly because his perceptions are distorted. If he were ready to accept responsibility for his actions in relationships, he wouldn't be abusive. Breaking through denial and minimization is one of the main tasks facing an abuse counselor. Most of the men in my groups admit to some abusive behavior, although they don't see it as abusive, of course, but they acknowledge only a small portion of what they have actually done, as I learned when I interviewed the abused partners. When an abuser denies an incident immediately after it happens, he can set his partner's head spinning. Picture a woman who arises in the morning with her stomach still tied in a knot from an ugly blowout the night before. Her partner makes a face at her in the kitchen and says, "Why are you so grumpy today?" Like nothing happened, right? Like nothing happened in the world. My God. They switch from this to that, like, to, oh my God. And then make you feel like you're in oblivion. Nothing happened. Oh my God. Wow. Wow. This right here is so true. Let me continue. Then he would say to her, "Why are you so grumpy today?" And then she would reply, "Why the hell do you think? You called me loser right in front of the children, and then you yanked my towel off so they would laugh at me. Am I supposed to come down the stairs whistling a happy tune?" "What are you talking about?" he gasps. "You are a drama junkie. I was clear across the room from you when your towel fell off. You're going to blame that on me? You're nuts." And he walks off shaking his head. You know, I'm picturing that. Now the woman is wondering, I know he pulled that towel off me. I know what I'm saying is right, but we were there together and he's saying that he didn't do it. So she's probably wondering if she's in her right mind now. He knows the game that he's playing. That's a wicked man. That's a wicked man. And that's why nobody deserves to stay with an abuser. They need to be put in a barrel and rolled down a hill. That's how I see it. Because look at him playing with the woman's mind. Now, let me read what Lundy writes after that. Good evening, Claudette. She says, "That's why they say see me and live with me are two different things." Two different things, Claudette. Two different things. And I read some of the stuff that he wrote here, like getting you and the people you care about turn against each other by betraying confidence, being rude to your friends, telling people lies about what you supposedly said about them, charming your friends, and then telling them bad things about you. And look, I have experienced this, still experiencing this to this day. Charming my friends and telling my friends lies on me. I tell you, the friends that I started off with in a particular relationship, the relationship done, and the friends are no longer there. They were charmed and told lies. Oh my God, I hear Norma says he suddenly get amnesia. Mr. Lundy, this man knows what he's talking about. He certainly does. There's so many things in this book that, man, Anyways, so here it is now. A woman can feel that she's losing her mind or develop actual psychiatric symptoms if the obvious realities of her life, including abuse, are denied repeatedly by her partner. And I hear Marcia said it again, gaslighting. Whoa, my Facebook folks are silent, all right? So, wow. The certainty and authority in his voice, with his eyes twisted up to show how baffled he is, leave her questioning herself. Did that really happen? Maybe it didn't. Maybe I do overreact to innocent things. Gosh. Women, you see, that's why we need to help each other. Because when you got a sister going through this, and when I say sister, not necessarily biological sister, but sisters. When you got a sister that's going through something like this, she's going to need all the help that she can get. Because when you live with somebody that you love and dedicate yourself and your time and the rest of your life to, and they're going to make you feel like this. Wow. Let me continue. The more serious the incident he denies, the more her grip on reality can start to slip. And if outsiders start to notice her instability, the abuser can use their observations to persuade them that her revelations of abuse by him are fantasies. Because guess what now? She's unstable. People are going to see her as unstable. And so what she's saying is not so. My God. If that's not wickedness, I don't know what that. Oh, it's gaslighting. It is. The partners of this style of abuser ask me, quote, after an incident, it seems like he really believes the abuse didn't happen. Is he consciously lying? End quote. The answer in most cases is yes. He denies his actions to close off discussions because he doesn't want to answer for what he did. And perhaps he even wants you to feel frustrated and crazy. However, a small percentage of abusers, perhaps 1 in 12, may have psychological conditions such as narcissistic or borderline personality disorder, in which they literally block any bad behavior from consciousness. One of the clues that your partner may have such a disturbance is if you notice him doing similar things to other people. If his denial and mind messing are restricted to you or to situations that are related to you, he is probably simply abusive. Denial and minimization are part of more destructive behavior patterns, whether they be alcohol abuse, gambling, or child abuse. Partner abuse is no exception. Let's move to reality number 10. I want to welcome Sarah Reeves. Good evening, Sarah. Come on in. Reality number 10. Abusers are possessive. New clients in my program sometimes look bewildered, as if I were giving a seminar on edible plants and they had wandered into the wrong room. In other words, he's saying that they come in and he's talking about what they're doing and they're acting as if they don't know, as they would say from Adam Gumtree, they don't know what in the world he's talking about. For those who are just coming in, there's a book that we're discussing. Why does he do that? Welcome. This is Real Talk. Reality number 10. Abusers are possessive. New clients on my program, he said, sometimes look bewildered, as if I were giving a seminar on edible plants and they had wandered into the wrong room. They can hardly wait to speak, rising out of their seats to sputter at me, quote, but these are our wives and girlfriends you're talking about. Do you really mean to say that someone else can dictate what we do in our relationships? End quote. They smile as they speak or shake their heads lightly as if they feel compassion for my dull wits. They assume I somehow have failed to realize that these women are theirs. The sense of ownership is one reason why abuse tends to get worse as relationships get more serious. The more history and commitment that develop in the couple, the more the abuser comes to think of his partner as a prized object. Possessiveness is at the core of the abuser's mindset, the spring from which all the other streams spout. On some level, he feels that he owns you and therefore has the right to treat you as he sees fit. Here, Sister Dacia says, sounds like they were mandated to treatment and not of their own will. I guess because some of them, they were threatened, like, I'm leaving this relationship. So, of course, they got up and they went. So here goes question number 6. Under Reality 10. Reality 10 is abusers are possessive. So the question is, why is he so insanely jealous? For many abusers, possessiveness takes the form of sexual jealousy. This style of man monitors his partner's associations carefully, expects her to account for her whereabouts at all times, and periodically rips into her with jealous accusations, as Fran did in chapter 1. I've been there. I've been there. I don't know. I don't have access to your phone. I don't know who you're with. You got access to my phone. You know who I'm with. But yet still I'm being accused. All right. Whew. I'm wondering what would happen if the shoe was on the other foot, And then it comes so forcefully that you can't say, but I don't have access to your phone. They make sure that they close off that so you don't get to tell them where they go wrong. You understand? While they're sending the dagger at you. And you're like, I got everything open to you. You know where I'm at all times. I check in with you. You don't with me. Your phone is off. I call, I can't get you. Or you answer me like you don't know who I am. May I help you? And stuff like that. And you're like, wow. But yet still, you are not the abuser. You are not the cheater. It's the other person. I think they live in a world of their own. I really do. But since I am not the expert on the matter, let me go back to what Mr. Lundy says. And I'm definitely going to be taking the comments. Whew. Norman says, hence why at times you meet some women, you can tell something is just not right with her. And I bet if you delve more, she has been abused. And the way she is off now is remnants from being abused. That's why I say, women, be kind to other women. Be kind to other women. Many times as women, we love to take a man is our friend and the man would say something about his ex-wife or even about a current wife or girlfriend. And we think that he's telling the truth because he's nicely dressed and they carry titles and, whether they're CEO or lawyers or whatever. We just read that. And we just bind to what they say about another woman. And then we start to spread it. Not even knowing that that man is telling us a lie. If that woman was supposed to open her mouth and talk about the things she's been through. Whoa.
So we should have did that 20.
Whoa.
I just
Boy.
the mercies of God. We don't understand. Psycho.
Lord Jesus.
If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. I was about
I know some women listening in this evening, that's all they can say. They can't even come on and comment. I feel you guys. Continue listening incognito. I hope that you'll be able to get healing. Something in this book will help you to get past where you are, because it is tough. Some of us women can't talk about it. Wow. Now, he says, ironically, the most accusatory abusers or accusatory abusers are among the ones most likely to be cheating themselves. Possessiveness and entitlement make the abuser feel that it is acceptable for him to have affairs, but not her. An equally important reason for the extreme jealousy exhibited by so many abusive men is the desire to isolate their partners. In chapter 1, we met Marshall, who did not believe his own hysterical accusations of infidelity against his wife. So what was driving his behavior? An abusive man who isolates his partner does so for primarily two reasons. Reason number one, he wants her life to be focused entirely on his needs. He feels that other social contacts will allow her less time for him, and he doesn't accept that she has that right. And number two, he doesn't want her to develop sources of strength that could contribute to her independence. Although it is often largely unconscious, abusive men are aware on some level that a woman's social contacts can bring her strength and support that could ultimately enable her to escape his control, as we saw with Dale and Maureen in chapter 1. An abusive man commonly attempts to keep his partner completely dependent on him to increase his power. Because of this mindset, an abusive man tends to perceive any relationships that his partner develops, whether with males or females, as threats to him. You may try to manage his problem by giving him lots of reassurance that you still love him and are not going to cheat on him. But you will find that his efforts to isolate you don't lessen, because his fears that you might sleep with another man are actually only a small part of why he's trying to isolate you. So that's not the real reason why he's doing it. At the same time, jealous accusations and isolation are only one form that ownership can take. There are abusive men who do not try to control their partner's associations, but their underlying attitude of, quote, "you're mine to do with as I see fit," end quote, reveals itself in other ways. If your partner's sister criticizes him for bullying you, he may tell her, "What I do with my girl is none of your business." If you have children, he may start to treat all family members as his belongings. His anger may escalate dangerously when you attempt to break away from him. Keep the word ownership in mind, and you may begin to notice that many of your partner's behaviors are noted in believing that you belong to him. Abusive men come in every personality type, arise from good childhoods and bad ones, are macho men or gentle, liberated men. No psychological test can distinguish an abusive man from a respectful one. Abusiveness is not a product of a man's emotional injuries or of deficits in his skills. In reality, abuse springs from a man's early cultural training. His key male role models and his peer influences. In other words, abuse is a problem of values, not of psychology. When someone challenges an abuser's attitudes and beliefs, he tends to reveal the contemptuous and insulting personality that normally stays hidden, reserved for private attacks on his partner. An abuser tries to keep everybody, his partner, his therapist, his friends and relatives, focused on how he feels so that they won't focus on how he thinks. Perhaps because on some level, he is aware that if you grasp the true nature of his problem, you will begin to escape his domination. Key points to remember. Abuse grows from attitudes and values, not feelings. The roots are ownership. The trunk is entitlement. And the branches are control. Abuse and respect are opposites. Abusers cannot change unless they overcome their core of disrespect toward their partners. Abusers are far more conscious of what they're doing than they appear to be. However, even their less conscious behaviors are driven by their core attitudes. Abusers are unwilling to be non-abusive, not unable. They do not want to give up power and control. Another key point to remember, you are not crazy. That's a woman. Trust your perceptions of how your abusive partner treats you and thinks about you. Those are the key points to remember in chapter 3. Gonna take a song. We have an hour to go. And when I come back, we're gonna go to chapter 4, the types of abusive men. And Sister Claritine, welcome. Norma says, what surprised me is that clergy was included in his clients. You didn't hear Bishop T.D. Jakes preach about it? How some of these pastors and bishops and ministers and apostles, how abusive they are? Girl, if night should turn today. Listen to this song, Loving You No Easy. We'll be right back for chapter 4.
Find it a good thing. And no man who find it a husband, find it a king. Now you more for me feel like the same. Me and you, we are tried from long time. From when in a sugar we are squeeze lime. And we are mix lemonade like daily. Right now, do you feel me? Can you hear me?
Yes, me hear everything you're saying, baby. And I do remember these things clearly when we did go to a bed without nothing feet. And we still laugh and talk until we drop asleep. Me love you, it not easy. Yeah, yeah, if we love you, it not easy. But me I gonna stick with you, doing some things that do it not please me.
Me love you, it not easy, yes. But all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
Me love you, it not easy. But me I gonna stick with you, doing some things that do it not please me. But me I gonna love you completely, yeah.
Me know say sometimes I mess up, but more have to make it up, more have to buy you a mansion from the hill and such. Take you out of the one room when no stop from squeeze you up. So have faith in me, baby, I make we stay
Me a
focused.
go wait, cause one day me must get it. By the grace of God, so we a go make it. Buy you the car we want from long time. From when in a sugar we have squeezed lime.
No, it not easy, yes. But all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
Me love you, it not easy. But me a go stick with you, do some things that do it not please me. But me a go love you completely, yeah. Me love you, it not
Easy, yes. But all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
Me love you, it not easy. But me I go stick with you, do some things that do it not please me. But me I go love you completely, yeah.
I'm gonna be there to love and cherish you for life.
And I promise you to always be your wife.
I'm gonna be there to love and cherish you for life.
And by the grace of God, I know we will survive.
Me and you, we are tried from long time. From when in a sugar we are squeeze like. And we are mix lemonade like daily. Right now, do you feel me? Can you hear me?
Yes, me hear everything you're saying, baby. And I do remember these things clearly when we did go to a bed without nothing feet. And we still laugh and talk until we drop
Me love you, it no
asleep.
easy, yes. But all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
Me love you, it not easy. But me I go stick with you, do some things that do it not please me. But me I go love you completely.
sound of Latwain right here. Loving you no easy. That's the husband and wife duo, by the way. Husband and wife duo. This is Real Talk, y'all.
Yes, me hear everything you're saying, baby. And I do remember these things clearly when we did go to a bed without nothing feet. And we still laugh and talk until we drop and
Love you we no easy, yes. What all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
me love you with no easy. But me gonna stick with you, do some things you do it not please me. But me gonna love you completely, yeah. Me love you with no
Easy, yes. What all we have to do is just love each other completely, yes. Each other completely.
Me love you with no easy. But me gonna stick with you, do some things you do it not please me. But me gonna love you completely, yeah.
From the USA to Europe and into the Caribbean, all the world over, this is Caribbean Gospel Radio FM, keeping you inspired and informed.
Love in the morning and love in the evening. Love the whole day through. The greatest of all is to love and be loved. We're so blessed to be loved by you. So blessed to be loved by you.
The script said we should have did that 20.
Want to welcome you back. After that break, I had a nice sweet and salty peanut snack right here. The Walmart brand, it's so good.
I was a bad man on road, but to Jesus me.
We're into this book, Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men, written by Lundy Bancroft, who worked with them for years and is an expert in that field. He takes us on a journey. You can get your copy on Amazon, of course, and you can wait for me or you can go ahead and read, all right? I know some of us, it's a lot, and we want to get there, but I'm taking it bit by bit. And so let's go into chapter 4, the types of abusive men. Good evening again to you guys. Norma says, one person I was considering a life with told me in one of our many conversations, you would have to go to the store with me. Ooh, if this wasn't a high-flying red flag, then nothing else could be more. He would have to go to the store with you. Wow. I want to welcome those on Facebook, those on YouTube, those on TuneIn Radio, Radio Garden, Online Radio Box. Thank you so much, guys, for coming in today. Chapter 4, from my softcover book, page 76. The types of abusive men. And here goes some quotes. I feel so bad for him. He's had a really hard life. Another one, I'm lucky to be with him. He could get any woman he wants. Next one, I'm really scared of what he may do to me someday. Next one, I shouldn't argue with him because I just come out feeling like an idiot. Next one, he's very sensitive. I shouldn't complain so much. He's doing the best he can. And then the last one, he says the reason he cheats on me so much is that he's a sex addict. Oh, Lord. All right. So here we go. The qualities that make up an abusive man are like the ingredients in a recipe. The basics are always present, but the relative amounts vary greatly. One man may be so severely controlling that his partner can't make a move without checking with him first, and yet, oddly, he contributes substantially to the domestic work and child care. Another man may allow his partner to come and go as she pleases, even accepting her friendships with men, but there is hell to pay if she fails to wait on him hand and foot, or if she makes the mistake of asking him to clean up after himself. Still, other abusers are less overtly controlling and entitled than either of these men, but mind twisting in the severity of their manipulations. The tactics and attitudes of abusers can vary from country to country, from ethnic group to ethnic group, from rich man to poor man. Abusers from each culture have their special areas of control or cruelty. All right, we're getting into this. Middle class white abusers, for example, tend to have strict rules about how a woman is allowed to argue. Oops. If she talks back to him, shows anger, or doesn't shut up when she's told to, he's likely to make her pay. My clients from Latin American cultures typically permit their partners to be more forceful and mouthy in a conflict than my white clients, but can be highly retaliatory if their partners give any attention to another male. Abusers select the pieces of turf they wish to stake out, influenced in these choices by their particular culture and background. Each woman who is involved with an abusive or controlling man has to deal with his unique blend of tactics and attitudes, his particular rhythm of good times and bad times, and his specific way of presenting himself to the outside world. No one should ever tell an abused woman, quote, "I know just what you're going through," end quote. Why? Because the experience of each woman is different. Viewed from other angle, however, abuse doesn't vary that much. One man uses a little more of one ingredient and a little less of the other, but the overall flavor of the mistreatment has core similarities: assaults on the woman's self-esteem, controlling behavior, undermining her independence, disrespect. Each abused woman has times of feeling that a riptide is dragging her under the sea and she struggles for air. Confusion has been part of the experience of almost every one of the hundreds of abused women I've spoken with. Whether because of the abuser's manipulativeness, his popularity, or simply the mind-bending contrast between his professions of love and his vicious psychological or physical assaults. Every abused woman finds herself fighting to make sense of what is happening. Recognizing the nature of the abusive man's problem can be a first step out of the fog. In this chapter, I introduce you to 10 styles of abuse I have encountered among the 2,000 men I have worked with. One or more of these profiles may jump out at you, so that you find yourself feeling, there he is. On the other hand, you might find instead that he does not fit neatly into any of these types, but seems rather to draw bits of himself from each one. In that case, think of these profiles not as different men, but as the varying faces of one man. Either way, the descriptions can help you to put your finger on what your partner is up to. The sections below describe each style of man while he is being abusive. I don't mean that he is like this all the time. In fact, men from any of the categories below can turn kind and loving at any moment and stay in that mode for days, weeks, or even months. So here's the first one, the demand man. The demand man. The demand man is highly entitled. He expects his partner's life to revolve around meeting his needs and is angry and blaming if anything gets in the way. He becomes enraged if he isn't catered to or if he is inconvenienced in even a minor way. The partner of this man comes to feel that nothing she does is ever good and that it is impossible to make him happy. He criticizes her frequently, usually about things that he thinks she should have done or done better for him. Is every highly demanding partner an abuse? Is every highly demanding partner an abuser? No. There are specific elements to the demand man's style. 1, he has little sense of give and take. His demands for emotional support, favors, caretaking, or sexual attention are well out of proportion to his contribution. He constantly feels that you owe him things that he has done nothing to earn. 2, he exaggerates and overvalues his own contributions. If he was generous one day back in 1997, oh, you're probably still hearing about it today as proof of how wonderfully he treats you and how ungrateful you are. He seems to keep a mental list of any favors or kindnesses he ever does and expects each one paid back at a heavy interest rate. He thinks you owe him tremendous gratitude for meeting the ordinary responsibilities of daily life when he does, but takes your contributions for granted. Number 3, when he doesn't get what he feels is his due, he punishes you for letting him down. Number 4, when he's generous or supportive, it's because he feels like it. When he isn't in the mood to give anything, he doesn't. He is positive or loving toward you when he feels the need to prove to himself or to others that he is a good person, or when there is something that he is about to demand in return. In other words, it's about him, not you. The longer you have been with him, the more his generous seeming actions appear self-serving. Number 5, if your needs ever conflict with his, he is furious. At these times, he attacks you as self-centered or inflexible, turning reality on its head with statements such as, all you care about is yourself. He tends to work hard to convince outsiders of how selfish and ungrateful you are, speaking in a hurt voice about all the things he does for you. At the same time, the demand man is likely to be furious if anything is demanded of him. Not only are you not supposed to demand any favors, you aren't even supposed to ask him to take care of his own obligations. If you ask him to clean up a mess he's left, he responds, I'm not your servant, with expletives, some of them. If you ask him to pay money he owes you or to work more hours to help out with the household expenses, he says, you're a typical woman. All you want from me is my money. If you complain if you complain to him how rarely he is there for you, he'll say you're a needy, controlling bee. He keeps twisting things around backward in these ways so that any effort you make to discuss your needs or his responsibility switches abruptly to being about his needs and your responsibilities. The demand man is sometimes less controlling than other abusers, as long as he is getting his needs met on his terms. He may allow you to have your own friendships or support you in pursuing your own career, but the effects on you of your partner's extreme entitlement can be just as destructive as severe control. The central attitudes driving the demand man are: it's your job to do things for me, including taking care of my responsibilities if I drop the ball on them. If I'm unhappy about any aspect of my life, whether it has to do with our relationship or not, it's your fault. These are the central attitudes driving the demand man. Here goes another one. You should not place demands on me at all. You should be grateful for whatever I choose to give. Another one is, I'm above criticism. And the last one is, I am a very loving and giving partner. You are lucky to have me. All right, so there goes number one, the demand man. Then here comes Mr. Right. Mr. Who? Right. Good evening, Carol, my big sister. You're late, she says. No problem. Come on in, sis, and take a seat. Norma says, I thank God I've had some close call escapes. Good. Locks, imagine living a life like that. You'd be walking on eggshells all the time. No joy, no peace. So here's Mr. Right now. Mr. Right considers himself the ultimate authority on every subject under the sun. You might call him Mr. Always Right. He speaks with absolute certainty, brushing your opinions aside like annoying gnats. That's the little flies. He seemed to see the world as a huge classroom in which he is the teacher and you are his student. He finds little of value in your thoughts or insights, so he seeks to empty out your head and fill it up with his jewels of brilliance. When Mr. Right sits in one of my groups for abusive men, he often speaks of his partner as if she were in danger from her own idiocy, and he needs to save her from herself. Mr. Right has difficulty speaking to his partner or about her without a ring of condescension in his voice, and in a conflict, his arrogance gets even worse. Mr. Right's superiority is a convenient way for him to get what he wants. When he and his partner are arguing about their conflicting desires, he turns it into a clash between right and wrong, or between intelligence and stupidity. Boy, this rings. Oh my God! He told you. He told you that some of the things you're going to be able to identify with, and some of them not. All right? That's the book that we're with tonight.
Station.
All right. We're getting right there. Thank you so much. This is Caribbean Gospel Radio FM. And we thank you for coming in this evening. Here we go.
It would tell you how I weep. I was a bad man now, but to Jesus me weep. If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. Me have a big smile I roll, but at night time me weep. Sometimes me know.
All right, let me just go ahead and finish up that paragraph. He ridicules and discredits her perspective so that he can escape dealing with it. Here is a conversation I had with a Mr. Right, whom I worked with in one of my abuser groups. All right, I hope that you guys are still hearing me on the outside. Let me go ahead and make sure that I check back here. Okay, so you're supposed to still be hearing me right where you are. All right. So here we go. I hope that we're still on. All right, let me just double check that and make sure that we're live. If you can see me and hear me, then come on in and type something and let me know that you are still here. We've been having problems, not just CGRFM, but all of us that use this one particular company. We've been having problems since Sunday. Since Sunday, we've been having quite a bit of problems. So if you can hear me, come on in and say something. All right, Lady Cece says loud and clear. All right, great. So I guess some of the others are not able to, but that's all right. So we'll continue with the program since at least one person all the way in the UK, Lady Cece, says that she is hearing loud and clear. All right, so here we go. He says, here's a conversation I had with a Mr. Right, thank you, Norma, whom I worked with in one of my abuser groups. Good night, First Lady Karen Rooms. How are you? Come on in. Good night to you. And Velma says she's seen and hearing. So here is the conversation. So Mr. Bancroft says, Pat, do you have any abusive behaviors to report from this past week? Pat is the man. So Pat was in his group. And Pat says, well, I did yell at Gwen once and call her the B word. We were fighting about money as usual. So Mr. Bancroft says, What was Gwen's perspective in the argument? Pat says she thinks money grows on trees. Mr. Bancroft said, Gwen said that money grows on trees. Pat says, well, no, not just like that, but that's how she acts. Mr. Bancroft says, let's try again. What was she saying in the argument? Thank you, Carol. Pat says, she thinks we have enough money to get both of the children whole new sets of clothes. But we just bought all new stuff for them only a few weeks ago, and we just don't have it in the bank right now. Bancroft said, does Gwen agree that the last round of shopping was only a few weeks ago? Pat says, no. She says it was 4 months ago at the beginning of the summer, which is a crock. I can remember that the summer was more than half over. Mr. Bancroft said, so her memory is different from yours. Did she say why she thinks it was earlier? Pat, of course not. She's, well, maybe she said something about how she remembers she paid the credit card bill for those clothes while the children were still in school, but she's wrong. Mr. Bancroft said, now you said that the money simply isn't there. Gwen obviously thinks differently. Where does she think the money should come from? Pat said, I already told you she wants me to be a magician who can just make it appear. Mr. Bancroft said, but she must have been making points about it. What was she saying? Pat said, oh, I don't know. She says we should sell our car and get a box, which would just end up costing us more in the long run. Plus, I don't want to deal with it. I guess that's a hootsie, as they would call it, a hootsie. Mr. Bancroft, what do you drive now? No, this is not the word the guy used, but some of these words, I cannot say them on air. So y'all have to understand, all right? But he did not call it a hootsie. He said something else. Oh, I don't know. She says we should sell our car, get a hootsie, which would just end up costing us more in the long run. Plus, I don't want to deal with it. Mr. Bancroft said to him, what do you drive now? And Pat said, a Saab. S-A-A-B. So Mr. Bancroft said, let me guess. She would like to trade the Saab in on a reliable car that has lower monthly payments, cheaper parts, and fewer repair bills. And then Pat said, yeah, that's what I said. A hootsie. Although it's not hootsie in the book, it's something else. S-word, box. Now, did you all hear this conversation? Lord Jesus. Did y'all hear this conversation right here? Look, I'm so glad Mr. Bancroft is who he is. And a lot of people are not Mr. Bancroft. And so when people come to us and they talk to us about their spouses and whatever relationship we're in, we jump on their side of the fence and we start to criticize that spouse, not knowing that a lot of what we're hearing is a lie, or it's a twisting of something that was said. You see how Mr. Bancroft got it out of him? Oh, wow. Let's continue. What Pat revealed in this exchange was that each time Gwen attempts to stand up for herself or put forth her views, he twists her statements to make them sound absurd. Notice how long it took me to drag out of him what Gwen's opinions actually were. You hear what this man start? And what was his wife's opinion? Just to trade in the car that they have for something else that could cost them lower payment, cheaper parts, and they wouldn't have to spend so much on the repair bills. But when he got around to telling his story, it was twisted, dragged in the mud, seared, all kinds of stuff. Notice how long it took me to drag out of him what Gwen's opinions actually were. Gwen naturally came out feeling stifled by Pat, as there was nothing she could do to get her views heard and taken seriously. Part of why Pat is convinced that Gwen is stupid is that he's so exaggeratedly certain of his own wisdom and clarity. Since she continues to disagree with him, he takes that as proof of her foolishness. Remember, this is Mr. Right now. When Mr. Right decides to take control of a conversation, he switches into his voice of truth, giving the definitive pronouncement on what is the correct answer or the proper outlook. Abuse counselors call this tactic defining reality. Over time, his tone of authority can cause his partner to doubt her own judgment and come to see herself as not very bright. I notice how often I'm speaking with the intelligent sounding partner of one of my clients, only to have her say to me, "I'm not that smart." The abuser wants her to doubt her mental abilities in this way so that he can control her better. Besides knowing all about the world, Mr. Right is also an expert on your life and how you should live it. Lord have mercy. Where is my thing here? Let me pause right here because I got to underline this. Norma says, Saabs are costly to maintain. They're gas guzzlers, so it would be better to trade it in. Oh, wow. Let me just get this out.
It will tell you how I weep. I was a bad man I road, but to Jesus me weep. If my pillow could speak, it would tell you how I weep. Me have a big smile I roll, but at night time me weep. Sometimes me no want to wake up, to me feel like my life a waste. It's like
I'm on page 82. I'm on the second to last paragraph. Besides knowing all about the world, Mr. Right is also an expert on your life and how you should live it. He has the answers to your conflicts at work, how you should spend your time, how you should raise your children. He's especially knowledgeable about your faults. And he likes to inventory what is wrong with you, as if tearing you down were the way to improve you. Lord have mercy. He may seem to enjoy periodically straightening you out in front of other people to humiliate you, thereby establishing his unquestionable intellectual superiority. When Mr. Right's partner refuses to defer to his sophisticated knowledge, he is likely to escalate to insulting her, calling her names, or mocking her with imitation. If he's still not satisfied that he has brought her down low enough, he may reach for bigger guns, such as ruining evening plans, leaving places without her, or saying bad things about her to other people. If he is physically assaultive, then this is the time he may throw things, raise fits, or attack violently. In short, Mr. Right finds some way to ensure that his partner regrets her insistence on having her own mind. Mr. Right, in some respects, is a less violent and frightening version of the drill sergeant, which we will see on page 86. But Mr. Right's control tends to be especially focused on telling his partner how to think. His partner feels suffocated by his control, as if he were watching her every move under a microscope. Mr. Right tries to sanitize his bullying by telling me, quote, "I have strong opinions," or "I like debating ideas." This is like a bank robber saying, "I'm interested in financial issues." Mr. Right isn't interested in debating ideas. He wants to impose his own. So, closing this one off, the central attitudes driving Mr. Right are: you should be in awe of my intelligence and should look up to me intellectually. I know better than you do, even about what's good for you. Your opinions aren't worth listening to carefully or taken seriously. The fact that you sometimes disagree with me shows how sloppy your thinking is. If you would just accept that I know what's right, our relationship would go much better. Your own life would go better too. When you disagree with me about something, no matter how respectfully or meekly, that's mistreatment of me. And finally, if I put you down for long enough, someday you'll see. The next one is the water torture. The water torturer. The water torturer style proves that anger doesn't cause abuse. He can assault his partner psychologically without even raising his voice. He tends, let me turn the page. He tends to stay calm in arguments, using his own evenness as a weapon to push her over the edge. He often has a superior or contemptuous grin on his face, smug and self-assured. He uses a repertoire of aggressive conversational tactics at low volume, including sarcasm, derision, such as openly laughing at her, mimicking her voice, and cruel, cutting remarks. Like Mr. Right, he tends to take things she has said and twist them beyond recognition to make her appear absurd, perhaps especially in front of other people. He gets to his partner through a slow but steady stream of low-level emotional assaults and perhaps occasional shoves or other minor acts of violence that don't generally cause visible injury but may do great psychological harm. He is relentless in his quiet derision and meanness. The impact on a woman of all these subtle tactics is that either her blood temperature rises to a boil, or she feels stupid and inferior, or some combination of the two. In an argument, she may end up yelling in frustration, leaving the room crying, or sinking into silence. The water torturer then says, "See, you're the abusive one, not me. You're the one who's yelling and refusing." You're the one who's yelling. Lord have mercy, Jesus. See, you're the one who's yelling. Let me see if I can find it back. And refusing to talk things out rationally. I wasn't even raising my voice. It's impossible to reason with you. Woo! Oh, wow. We continue with the next paragraph. The psychological effects of living with the water torturer can be severe. His tactics can be difficult to identify, so they sink in deeply. Women can find it difficult not to blame themselves for their reactions to what their partner does if they don't even know what to call it. When someone slaps you in the face, you know you've been slapped. But when a woman feels psychologically assaulted, with little idea why, after an argument with the water torturer, she may turn her frustration inward. How do you seek support from a friend, for example, when you don't know how to describe what is going wrong? The water torturer tends to genuinely believe that there is nothing unusual about his behavior. When his partner starts to confront him with his abusiveness, which she usually does sooner or later, he looks at her as if she was crazy and says, "What the hell are you talking about? I've never done anything to you." Friends and relatives who have witnessed the couple's interactions may back him up. They shake their heads and say to each other, "I don't know what goes on with her." They just explode at him sometimes. And they shake their heads and say to each other, quote, "I don't know what goes on with her. She just explodes at him sometimes, and he's so low-key," end quote. Their children can develop the impression that mom blows up over nothing. She herself may start to wonder if there is something psychologically wrong with her. The water torturer is payback-oriented like most abusive men, but he may hide it better. If he's physically abusive, his violence may take the form of cold-hearted slaps, quote, "for your own good," or, quote, "to get you to wake up," rather than explosive rage. His moves appear carefully thought out, and he rarely makes obvious mistakes, such as letting his abusiveness show in public that could turn other people against him or get him in legal trouble. If you're involved with a water torturer, you may struggle for years trying to figure out what is happening. You may feel that you overreact to his behavior and that he isn't really so bad, but the effects of his control and contempt have crept up on you over the years. If you finally leave him, you may experience intense periods of delayed rage as you become conscious of how quietly but deathly oppressive he was. This style of man rarely lasts long in an abuser program unless he has a court order. He is so accustomed to having complete success with his tactics that he can't tolerate an environment where the counselors recognize and name his maneuvers and don't let him get away with them. He tends to rapidly decide that his group leaders are as crazy as his partner and heads for the door. Closing off this one, the central attitudes driving the water torturer are: you're crazy, you fly off the handle over nothing, I can easily convince other people that you're the one who's messed up. As long as I'm calm, you can't call anything I do abusive, no matter how cruel. And the other one is: I know exactly how to get under your skin. And as he said, you might not identify everything as he lays it out, but it might be your situation. That man might be bits and pieces from all of the types here. The next one is the drill sergeant. The drill sergeant. I hope I can finish up this tonight. I know I'm not going to be able to. I'm going up. Oh, I'm going to finish it. This is actually the end of part 1. So I'm going to finish it tonight. Let me hurry along. The drill sergeant. The drill sergeant takes controlling behavior to its extreme, running his partner's life in every way that he can. He criticizes her clothing, tells her whether she can go out or not, interferes with her work. He wants her to have no one close to her, so he ruins her relationships with friends and relatives or simply forbids her to see them. He may listen to her phone calls or read her mail or require the children to report on her activities anytime he's away. If she's at home by his appointed curfew at night, she's at risk for abuse. She feels like a little girl living with a tyrannical father with no more freedom than an 8-year-old would have. The drill sergeant is often fanatically jealous. He verbally assaults his partner with accusations that she's cheating on him or checking out other men, and tosses crass and disturbing sexual terms into his tirades. He may augment his hateful remarks about his partner with hideous comments about females in general, such as all women are WHORES. The emotional experience of these verbal attacks can be similar to that of a sexual assault. The woman is left feeling violated, debased, and traumatized. At the same time, the style of abuser more often than not is out having affairs himself. It isn't fidelity he cares about, it's possession. The drill sergeant is, unfortunately, almost sure to be physically violent sooner or later, probably beginning with threats and then eventually escalating to assault. If his partner stands up to him, such as by attempting to preserve any of her rights to freedom, his violence and threats are likely to escalate until she's hurt or terrified enough that she submits to his control. He is a risk to beat his partner up to the point of severe injury. Getting away from the drill sergeant can be difficult. Since he monitors the woman's movements so closely, it is a challenge for her to get to support group for abused women or to seek other kinds of support. Since he isolates her from people, she has to draw entirely on her own strength. In many days, she may feel like she doesn't have much strength left. And since from time to time he's probably openly violent, she's forced to consider what the consequences of attempting to leave him could be, including whether he might try to kill her. If your partner is a drill sergeant, your situation is a dangerous one. You may have to use some courage as well as careful vigilance to even get the opportunity to read this book. Perhaps you're hiding it under a mattress or reading it at someone else's house in quick bits. Don't give up. Many women have gone through this kind of captivity and have found a way to escape, even if it takes some time. The single most important thing to do is to seek opportunities to phone a hotline for abused women. Call them to speak for 5 minutes if that's all you can safely do for now. Call every day if you can. The hotline is the beginning of the path to freedom. You may be sorely tempted to have a secret affair since your partner shows you so little kindness or tenderness. A positive sexual connection may be especially affirming for you because of how sexually degrading the drill sergeant tends to be. But cheating on him can be deadly if he catches you. Consider holding off on seeing other men until you have gotten yourself out of that situation, gotten yourself safe. The drill sergeant often has some psychological problems. Although mental health issues do not cause abusiveness, they can intensify a man's violent tendencies. If he sometimes seems to become convinced of things that are obviously not true, has trouble getting along with people in general, was severely abused or neglected as a child, or has other indications of mental illness, you need to take even greater caution. And then he says to read more about dealing with dangerous abusers, see The Terrorist later in this chapter on page 99 and Leaving an Abuser Safely in chapter 9. Now, the central attitudes driving the drill sergeant are: 1, I need to control your every move or you will do it wrong. 2, I know the exact way that everything should be done. 3, you shouldn't have anyone else or anything else in your life besides me. 4, I'm going to watch you like a hawk to keep you from developing strength or independence. And lastly, I love you more than anyone in the world, but you disgust me. Those are the attitudes that drives the drill sergeant. Mr. Sensitive. All right, I need to get up a minute and let my blood flow. So let me give you a song, and then I'm gonna be right back. Listen to this.
Well, this one is dedicated to every man and woman out there, you know. Yeah, there's someone special for you, you know. Now, every one of them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush, them stick a bush, them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush. Yeah, every one of them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush, them stick a bush, them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush, every one of them stick a bush. You for me and I for you. God made us a perfect two. Baby, I can feel you. Your love is incredible. One shall chase 1,000 and to put 10,000 to flight. Baby, we can make it. Come and let's do this right. Every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Them stick a bush. Them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Yeah, every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Them stick a bush. Them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. God, you bless.
All right, let's pick up on Mr. Sensitive. That's the next one. Mr. Sensitive. Mr. Sensitive appears to be the diametric opposite of the drill sergeant. He's soft-spoken, gentle and supportive when he isn't being abusive. He loves the language of feelings, openly sharing his insecurities, his fears, and his emotional injuries. He hugs other men. He may speak out about the absurdity of war or the need for men to get in touch with their feminine side. Perhaps he attends a men's group or goes on men's retreats. Often he has participated extensively in therapy or 12-step programs or read all the big self-help books. So he speaks the language of popular psychology and introspection. His vocabulary is sprinkled with jargon like developing closeness, working out our issues, and facing up to hard things about myself. He presents himself to women as an ally in this struggle against sex role limitations. To some women, he seems like a dream come true. So what's wrong with this picture? Nothing obvious yet. But this is exactly the problem. Mr. Sensitive wraps himself in one of the most persuasive covers a man can have. If you start to feel chronically mistreated by him, you are likely to assume that something is wrong with you. And if you complain about him to other people, they may think you must be spoiled. Quote, "You have the new age man. What more do you want?" End quote. The following dynamics are typical of a relationship with Mr. Sensitive and may help explain your feeling that something has gone awry. Welcome, Annabella. Thank you so much for coming in. Yes. All right, good. Number one, you seem to be hurting his feelings constantly, though you aren't sure why. And he expects your attention to be focused endlessly on his emotional injuries. If you're in a bad mood one day and say something unfair or insensitive, it won't be enough for you to give him a sincere apology and accept responsibility. He'll go on and on about it, expecting you to grovel as if you had treated him with profound cruelty. Notice the twist there? This is just what an abuser accuses his partner of doing to him, when all she's really looking for is a heartfelt, "I'm sorry." Number two, when your feelings are hurt, on the other hand, he will insist on brushing over it quickly. He may give you a stream of pop psychological language, such as "just let the feelings go through you, don't hold on to them so much," or "it's all in the attitude you take toward life," or "no one can hurt you unless you let them." He may give you a stream of pop psychology language to substitute for genuine support for your feelings, especially if you are upset about something he did. None of these philosophies applies when you upset him, however. Number three, with the passing of time, he increasingly casts the blame onto you for anything he's dissatisfied with in his own life. Your burden of guilt keeps growing. Number four, he starts to exhibit a mean side that no one else ever sees and may even become threatening or intimidating. Mr. Sensitive has the potential to turn physically frightening, as any style of abuser can, no matter how much he may preach nonviolence. After an aggressive incident, he will speak of his actions as anger rather than as abuse, as though there were no difference between the two. He blames his assaultive behavior on you or on his emotional issues, saying that his feelings were so deeply wounded that he had no other choice. Many people reject the possibility that Mr. Sensitive could be an abuser. I ran into this disbelief one weekend when I was leading a training course on emotional recovery, as I periodically do. My workshops focus partly on the healing effects of crying, and so tend to be attended by more women than men. The males who do come have included many of the most wonderful men it has been my good fortune to know, as well as a handful of the biggest manipulators. A few years ago, a participant named Deanna approached me anxiously before a workshop. She explained that an ex-partner of hers named Brad had called her a few days ahead of the workshop to tell her he was attending the same weekend. She was uncomfortable and told him that if he showed up, she would leave. He promised not to bother her, though, and said he would not bring up their relationship in any way. He was coming with his new girlfriend, which eased Deanna's worries. I spent some time talking with Brad as the workshop was starting without mentioning Deanna. And he seemed likable, kind, and what can I say, sensitive. However, I observed within a few hours that he was In fact, speaking to other people about his past with Deanna and getting them riled up about her running away from their unresolved issues. On Sunday morning, he finally provoked a scene about their relationship in front of the full workshop, which was humiliating to Deanna. The story does not end there. I called a break and took Brad aside. I told him that it was my understanding that he had agreed not to raise these issues and that it had become obvious to me that he had come for the weekend with the intention of doing precisely what he had promised not to. I went on to point out that he had taken Deanna's weekend away from her and that I considered this kind of power move to be abuse, especially since it was directed at an ex-partner. Saying the word abuse to an abusive person can be like lighting a tin box, whatever that is. When you name the unmentionable secret, he goes wild. Brad got loud, rolled his eyes at what a hysterical exaggerator he considered me to be, and adopted a victim stance. Yeah, he started playing the victim now, saying, "I beg you to stop this." Then came the most important part. He said in a screeching whine, "I have only put a hand on a partner once in my life, many years ago, and I just barely pushed her away from me like this." And he shoved me hard by the shoulder. He did it after she called my mother a sick woman. Well, why was Brad denying a history of assault while actually admitting to one when I hadn't said anything about violence? The possibility that he might be physically abusive had never occurred to me before, but it certainly did now. The signs were all there. Bullying Deanna that weekend and then insisting it was for her own good. Feeling entitled to ignore an important agreement. Blaming his earlier girlfriend for his assault of her and minimizing it. The strength of the shove he gave me would have shaken up most women. I now doubted that the assaultive incident he had described was his only occasion of physically intimidating a woman. At this point, I required Brad to leave the workshop. I then had to deal with a mini insurrection from some of the other workshop participants who couldn't believe I was ejecting this gentleman who was so in touch with his feelings. He cries after all. How could he be abusive? This quote-unquote gentleman style of abuser tends to be highly self-centered and demanding of emotional catering. He may not be the man who has a fit because dinner is late, but rather erupts because of some way his partner failed to sacrifice her own needs or interests to keep him content. He plays up how fragile he is to divert attention from the swath of destruction he leaves behind. The central attitudes driving Mr. Sensitive are, I'm against the macho men, so I couldn't be abusive. As long as I use a lot of psychobabble, no one is going to believe that I'm mistreating you. I can control you by analyzing how your mind and emotion works and what your issues are from childhood. I can get inside your head whether you want me there or not. Nothing in the world is more important than my feelings. And finally, women should be grateful to me for not being like those other men. Marcia says, after him, hot up my head. All right. So the next abusive man is, or the next abusive style is the player. The player. The player is usually good looking and often sexy, but sometimes he just thinks he is. Why Mr. Lundy got a birthday bubble? You know, he had it going and then he's like, but sometimes he just thinks he is. In the early part of a relationship, he seems head over heels in love and wants to spend as much time as possible in bed together. He's a pretty good lover. You may feel lucky that you've caught someone who knows how to turn you on and feel proud to be seen with him. Your self-opinion gets a nice boost. After a while, though, a few things start to bother you. You notice that apart from sex, his interest in you is waning, and even his sexual energy is dropping off a little. He seems to lock his eyes pretty hard onto women that walk by. He flirts with waitresses, clerks, or even friends of yours. Sexual undertones seem to run through most of his interactions with females, except for ones he finds completely unattractive. Rumors start to come back to you that he's been seen with this woman, that he's sleeping with that one, that he's pursuing another one, but she isn't interested yet. Lady CC, good evening. I could tell you about that one, the player. At first, you discount these rumors as hurtful gossip, but after a while, you start to wonder. The player often starts to stall on moving in together or agreeing to be exclusive, even though earlier he couldn't wait to get serious. He may say that he's been hurt or has a fear of commitment or I'm just not ready. But the real issue is that he doesn't want restrictions on his freedom. Much of his satisfaction in life comes from exploiting women and feeling like a sexual animal. Women around the player seems to get angry at each other a lot rather than at him, and sometimes get into physical confrontations. These tensions work out well for him, diverting attention from his infidelity and dishonesty. He sets up this dynamic with some combination of the following tactics. 1, he knows how to make each woman feel that she's the special one, and yet at the same time keep her off balance so that she never feels quite sure of where she stands with him. 2, he tells each one that the others are lying about their involvements with him because they're jealous of her, or because he turned her down, or because he used to be involved with them but isn't anymore. 3, he tells each one stories about how other women have mistreated him, or shares other bits of information, largely invented, to make previous or current women in his life sound conniving, vindictive, or addicted to substances. 4, he breaks up with women and gets back together with them so that no one can keep track of what's going on. And 5, he includes 1 or 2 women in his circle who feel unattractive because he knows he can have more power over them and manipulates them into hating the women who are seen as more attractive. If this is your partner's style. Now, I'm looking at this before I continue reading that paragraph. No wonder, women, you see the wake-up call we get right here? No wonder why we tear others down based on what they say to us. Wow, I hear you, Lady CC. You really need to get this book. You really need to get this book. And especially Christian women, you need to get this book. Because you got players in the pulpit and players in the pew. You got abusers in the pulpit and abusers in the pew. You need to get this book. I continue. If this is your partner's style, you won't necessarily ever be sure whether he's really having sex with other women or if he just flirts because he enjoys the attention and likes you to feel threatened. He may hotly deny that he ever cheats and try to turn the tables by accusing you of being too suspicious. But even if he's telling the truth, which he probably isn't, his constant flirtatious behavior can be as damaging as actual affairs. Either way, he will damage your other relationships because you will start to perceive any woman as a potential threat to you. If he has a history of hitting on women who are close to you, such as your sister or best friend, you can end up isolated from the women you care about most because you're afraid he will have affairs with them unless you keep them away. Chronic infidelity is abusive in itself, but the player doesn't stop there. He is irresponsible, callous in dealing with his partner's feelings, and periodically verbally abusive. As the relationship progresses, he may start to go for long periods, giving his partner next to no attention and barely speaking to her, so she feels shelved. He probably refuses to take responsibility for safe sex, such as using a condom, and he may have fathered children who he's not supporting. His abusiveness can escalate abruptly if he's confronted or caught in his infidelities, and he may turn physically frightening at this point. In a strange but dangerous twist, the player sometimes hits his partner for catching him cheating rather than the reverse. The player's constant flirting and cheating helps him to get away with other forms of mistreatment. His partner is likely to focus on her hurt feelings about his infidelities and pour effort into stopping him from straying, and in the process, lose sight of his pattern of abuse. When she asked me whether I think her partner will ever settle down and be faithful to her if they get married, for example, I answer, he may someday, but what you will have then is a faithful abuser. His promiscuity is a symptom of a deeper problem. He is incapable of taking women seriously as human beings rather than as playthings. With that mindset, he'll be a destructive partner whether he cheats or not. The players I have worked with sometimes claim to suffer from sex addiction and join Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, which they may discover is a good place to pick up women. But sex addiction doesn't cause dishonesty, verbal abusiveness, or intimidating behavior. The player is not a sex addict at all. If he's addicted to anything, it's to the thrill of using women without regard for the effects on them. The central attitudes driving the player are: women were put on this earth to have sex with men, especially me. Women who want sex are too loose, and the women who refuse sex are too uptight. It's not my fault that women find me irresistible. This is a word-for-word quotation from a number of my clients, he says. And then they go on to say, it's not fair to expect me to refuse temptation when it's all around me. Women seduce me sometimes and I can't help it. If you act like you need anything from me, I'm going to ignore you. I'm in this relationship when it's convenient for me and when I feel like it is. Well, and when I feel like it. Women who want the non-sexual aspects of themselves appreciated are considered bees. If you could meet my sexual needs, I wouldn't have to turn to other women. And these are the central attitudes that drives the player. The next one is Rambo. Rambo. And I'm almost close to the end. A couple more pages. Rambo. Rambo is aggressive with everybody, not just his partner. He gets a thrill out of the sensation of intimidating people and strives to handle all life situations by subtly or covertly creating fear. He has an exaggerated, stereotypical view of what a man is supposed to be, which goes hand in hand with seeing women as delicate, inferior, and in need of protection. Rambo often comes from a home or neighborhood where he was the target of violence himself and learned that the only way to feel safe is to be stronger, tougher, and less caring than everybody else. He has little patience for weakness, fragility, or indecision. Often he has a criminal record for violence, theft, drunk driving, or drug dealing. Early in a relationship, Rambo is likely to be loving and kind to his partner like most abusers because he lacks fear or pretends to. He can make a woman feel safe and protected. This style of abuser can therefore be particularly appealing to a woman who comes from a violent home herself, or to one who is in the process of leaving another abusive relationship. Rambo can make you feel as though his aggressiveness would never be directed toward you because he loves you. He wishes to look after your safety as if you were his daughter. He enjoys the role of protector, feeling like a gallant knight. However, he lacks respect for women, and this disrespect, combined with his general violent tendencies, means that it is only a matter of time before he will be the one you need protection from. Many highly masculine men are not Rambo. The notion that all macho men are likely to abuse women is based largely on class and ethnic prejudices, the same misconceptions that allow Mr. Sensitive or Mr. Right to skate by undetected. There are plenty of tough guys out there who are friendly to everyone and avoid aggressive interactions whenever possible, but enjoy lifting weights, playing rough sports, hunting, and other aspects of stereotypical masculinity. They may be good fighters, but only in self-defense. It isn't macho that women need to watch out for. The danger signs are violence and intimidation toward anyone, and disrespect and superiority toward women. Sometimes Rambo is a psychopath or a sociopath, which can make him all the more emotionally abusive, and in some cases, physically abusive as well. Later, we will take a look at psychopaths and other mentally disordered abusers. The central attitudes driving Rambo are: 1, strength and aggressiveness are good, compassion and conflict resolution are bad. Anything that could be even remotely associated with homosexuality, including walking away from possible violence or showing any fear of grief, has to be avoided at any cost. Femaleness and femininity, which he associates with homosexuality, are inferior. Women are here to serve men and be protected by them. Men should never hit women because it is unmanly to do so. However, exceptions to this rule can be made for my own partner if her behavior is bad enough. Men need to keep their women in line. And the last thing that drives them is: you are a thing that belongs to me, akin to a trophy. Then we have the victim. The victim. Life has been hard and unfair for the victim. This is another type of abusive man, the victim. To hear him tell it, his intelligence has been chronically underestimated. He has been burned by people he trusted, and his good intentions have been misunderstood. The victim appeals to a woman's compassion and desire to feel that she can make a difference in his life. He often tells persuasive and heart-rending stories about how he was abused by his former partner, sometimes adding the tragic element that she's now restricting or preventing his contact with his children. He maneuvers the woman into hating his ex-partner and may succeed in enlisting her as a campaign of harassment, rumor spreading, or battling for custody. And I've seen those men, and I've seen those women. We sit by and we allow those men to twist our heads, and suddenly we hate the ex-wives that we know nothing about. We never take time out to learn anything about them. We go based on what the man says. You know when we catch it? When he turns on us and starts to tell another woman about us. When he leaves us, then that is when we turn around and say, my God, so he was really lying about Janet. Janet probably didn't do that because now he's telling Marcy these things about me. Women, be kind to each other. Here Norma says, my God, we're hearing. The abuser is something else. The player puts his partner in danger in so many ways. We're on to the victim. He says, as a counselor of abusive men, I have dozens of times been in the position of interviewing a man's former partner and then speaking with the new one. Oops, this is interesting. Listen. The new partner usually speaks at length about what a wicked witch the woman before her was. I could have closed the book right here because we all know that. We all know that. We always jump on the other woman. That's one thing I say. Me, any man I've had that had a woman before and start to tell me things about them, I take it with a grain of salt. If the woman and I don't talk, it's because she don't want to talk to me. I have nothing against a woman based on a man's story. Because I know that a lot of it is nothing but lies. Ah, boy. He said the new partner usually speaks at length about what a wicked witch the woman before her was. I can't tell her what I know, much as I wish I could, because of my responsibility to protect the confidentiality and safety of the former partner. All I can say is, quote, I always recommend whenever there are claims of emotional or physical abuse that women talk to each other directly and not just accept the man's denial. But they know what they do. Because they know who we are, they set us up to hate each other. And then there we are hating each other over the abuser. Women sometimes ask me, he says, but what if a man I am dating really was victimized by his former girlfriend? How can I tell the difference? So Mr. Lundy says, here are some things to watch for. Let's go. Number one. All right, I got to pick up my phone. I'll be right back.
This one is dedicated to every man and woman out there, you know? Yeah. There's someone special for you, you know? Now, every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Them stick a bush, them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Yeah, every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Them stick a bush, them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. Every one of them stick a bush. You for me and I for you. God made us a perfect two. Baby, I can feel you. Your love is incredible. One shall chase 1,000 and to put 10,000.
All right, so here he says, here are a few things. Thank you so much, guys. He says, here are a few things to watch out for. To the question, he says, women ask him, but what if a man I am dating really was victimized by his former girlfriend? How can I tell the difference? So he says, here are some things for us to watch out for. One, if you listen carefully, you can often hear the difference between anger toward an ex-partner, which would not be worrisome in itself, and disrespect or contempt, which should raise warning flags. A man who has left a relationship with bitterness should nonetheless be able to talk about his ex-partner as a human being, with some understanding of what her side of the conflicts was, and some ways he might have contributed to what went wrong. If he speaks in degrading or superior ways about her, or makes everything that went wrong in the relationship her fault, be careful, because it is likely that he was the abusive one. Number two, try to get him to talk about his own conduct in the relationship, especially around the time of the breakup. If he blames his own behavior on her, that's a bad sign. Number three, be particularly careful with a man who claims to have been the victim of physical violence by a previous female partner. The great majority of men who make such claims are physical abusers. Ask him for as much detail as you can about the violent incidents, and then try to talk to her or seek out anyone else who could give you a different perspective on what happened. And in chapter 5, he has watch for warning signs of abusiveness. Number 4, he says, pay attention to how he talks and thinks about abused women. A genuine male victim tends to feel sympathy for abused women and support their cause. The victim, on the other hand, often says that women exaggerate or fabricate their claims of abuse or insist that men are abused just as much as women are. The victim may adopt the language of abuse victims, claiming, for example, that his ex-partner was focused on power and control, disrespected him, and always have to have her own way. In a few years, he will be using similar reality inversion language about you. Unless, of course, you kowtow to him, to his satisfaction. The victim is highly self-centered in relationships. Everything seems to revolve around his wounds, and he keeps himself at the center of attention. If you have children, he tries to get them to feel sorry for him as well. He seems forever to be telling you, you don't understand me, you don't appreciate me, you hold my mistakes over my head. Yet you sense that the dynamic is actually the other way around. If you stand up to him about these distortions, he tells you that you're abusing him or says, you just can't tolerate my standing up to your bullying. This recurring inversion of reality is similar to what happens when Mr. Sensitive, but without the introspective psychology, gentleman, or recovering alcoholic routines. If you leave him, your risk is seeking custody of your children, presenting himself to the court as a victim of your abuse and of your efforts to turn the children against him. Often, the victim claims to be victimized not only by you, but also by his boss, his parents, the neighbors, his friends, and strangers on the street, even their pastors. Everyone is always wronging him, and he's always blameless. When the victim joins an abuser group, his story tends to go like this, quote, I put up with my partner's mistreatment of me for years, and I never fought back or even tried to defend myself. But I finally couldn't take it anymore, and I started to give her back a little taste of what she was doing to me. So now I've been labeled abusive. Women are allowed to do those things and nobody cares. But as soon as a man does it, he's a pariah, whatever that is, end quote. This line of reasoning many times develops into a discussion of how men are the victims of women overall in society, because women run the world. This is a startling distortion, given with which gender actually dominates among all legislatures, police departments, judgeships, businesses, and so on and nauseam. When I point out this reality to the victim, he describes a kind of paranoid fantasy in which women are behind the scenes, secretly pulling the strings, largely by getting men to feel sorry for them. His capacity for turning things into their opposites in this way is a central cause of his abusiveness. If you're involved with the victim and want to escape his abuse, you may find that you feel guilty toward him, despite his treatment of you, and have difficulty ending the relationship as a result. You may feel that because his life has been so hard, you are reluctant to add to his pain by abandoning him. You may worry that he won't take care of himself if you leave, that he will wither away from depression, won't eat or sleep, or might even try to kill himself. The victim knows how to present himself as helpless and pathetic, so that you will find it harder to take your own life back. The terrorist. I worked for a few months with an abused woman named Gloria, who was wondering how much longer she would be alive. Her husband, Gerald, would glare at her, drum his fingers methodically on the table, and said, "You have 6 months left. Things better shape up around here. 6 months." Her head would swim and her heart would race with fear, and she would plead with him to tell what exactly he planned to do to her at the end of that period. "Just wait." Oh, and he would answer with maybe just a hint of a cold smile. "Just wait and see. Just wait and see. 6 months, Gloria." Gerald had never laid a hand on Gloria in the 5 years they have been together. but she was terrified. She started working with me on making an escape plan to run away with their 2-year-old son. The terrorist tends to be both highly controlling and extremely demanding. His worst aspect, however, is that he frequently reminds his partner that he could physically rip her to pieces or even kill her. He doesn't necessarily beat her. However, some abusers know how to terrorize their partners with threats, strange, veiled statements, and bizarre behaviors. One of my violent clients cut an article out of the newspaper about a woman who had been murdered by her husband, and he taped it up on the refrigerator. Another man responded to his partner's announcement that she was leaving him by spilling the blood of an animal in front of the house. Ooh. Another client would take out his gun when he was angry at his partner, but would insist that he was just going to clean it and that he had nothing to do with her. That it had nothing to do with her. Wow. Unlike most other abusers, the terrorist often seems to be sadistic. He gets enjoyment out of causing pain and fear and seems to find cruelty thrilling. He's likely to have been severely abused as a child, which generally is not true of other abusers. However, you cannot help him to heal. This may be difficult to accept, since the hope of helping him overcome his problems may be what gets you through the terror of living with him. The terrorist's problems are much too deep for a partner to solve, as they involve a complex weave of serious psychological problems with the typical destructive nature of an abuser. You need to focus instead on getting yourself safe. The terrorist's top goal is to paralyze you with fear so that you won't dare think of leaving him or cheating on him. The great majority of abusers who make lethal threats against their partners never carry them out, but that still leaves many who do. The trauma of living with this kind of terror can be profound and can make it extremely difficult for you to think clearly about strategies for escaping to safety. However, most women do manage to get out. The critical first step is to seek confidential help as soon as possible. Begin by calling an abuse hotline, and there are more suggestions in the book. When a woman does leave the terrorist, he may stalk or threaten her, and this dangerous harassment can continue for a long time. If the couple has children, he may attempt to get custody or unsupervised visitation so that he can terrorize or control her through the children. He also may use information he has about her, such as where she works or where her parents live, to track her and to threaten her loved ones. It is essential that friends, relatives, courts, and communities understand the realities of these risks and give the woman the most complete support and protection possible, while simultaneously taking steps to hold the abuser accountable. It may be possible to stop the terrorist from escalating to murder, but only if he gets a strong message that stalking and threatening an ex-partner is unacceptable, that he's responsible for his own actions, and that the community is prepared to jail him if his threatening behavior does not stop immediately. Actions short of these are often insufficient. And he says that chapter 10 contains more information for a woman who's involved in a custody or visitation battle with an abuser, or for those who are concerned that one may start. Then we have the mentally ill or addicted abuser. And this is the last one. The mentally ill or addicted abuser. This last category is not actually separate from the others. An abusive man of any of the aforementioned styles can also have psychiatric or substance abuse problems, although the majority do not. Even when mental illness or addiction is a factor, it is not the cause of a man's abuse of his partner, but it can contribute to the severity of his problem and his resistance to change. When these additional problems are present, it is important to be aware of the following points. 1. Certain mental illnesses can increase the chance that an abuser will be dangerous and use physical violence. These include paranoia, severe depression, delusions or hallucinations, which is psychosis, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is OCD, and antisocial personality disorder known as psychopathy or sociopathy. These psychiatric conditions also make it next to impossible for an abuser to change, at least until the mental illness has been brought under control through therapy and or medication, which can take years. Even if the mental illness is properly treated, his abusiveness won't necessarily change. Number 2, an abuser's reaction to going on or off medication are unpredictable. A woman should take extra precautions for her safety at such a time. Abusers tend to go off medication before long. I have had few clients who were consistent and responsible about taking their meds in the long term. They don't like the side effects and they're too selfish to care about the implications of the mental illness for their partners or children. Number 3, the potential danger of a mentally ill abuser has to be assessed by looking at the severity of his psychiatric symptoms in combination with the severity of his abuse characteristics. Looking at his psychiatric symptoms alone can lead to underestimating how dangerous he is. Number 4, antisocial personality disorder is present in only a small percentage of abusers, but can be important. Those who suffer from this condition lack a conscience and thus are repeatedly involved in behaviors that are harmful to others. Some signs of this condition include he started getting into illegal behavior when he was still a teenager. His dishonest or aggressive behavior involved situations unrelated to his partner rather than being restricted to her. He periodically gets into trouble at workplaces or in other contexts for stealing, threatening, or refusing to follow instructions, and is likely to have a considerable criminal record by about age 30, though the offenses may be largely minor ones. He is severely and chronically irresponsible in a way that disrupts the lives of others or create danger. And he tends to cheat on women a lot, turn them against each other, and maintain shallow relationships with them. The psychopath's physical violence is not necessarily severe, contrary to the popular image, but he may be very dangerous nonetheless. Antisocial personality disorder is very difficult to change through therapy, and there is no effective medication for treating it. It is highly compatible with abusiveness toward women. And number 5, those who suffer from narcissistic personality disorder have a highly distorted self-image. They're unable to accept that they might have faults and therefore are unable to imagine how other people perceive them. This condition is highly compatible with abusiveness, though it is present in only a small percentage of abusive men. Clues to the presence of this disorder include A, your partner's self-centeredness is severe and it carries over into situations that don't involve you. B, he seems to relate everything back to himself. And C, he's outraged whenever anyone criticizes him and is incapable of considering that he could ever be anything other than kind and generous. This disorder is highly resistant to therapy and is not treatable with medication. The abuser with this disorder is not able to change substantially through an abuser program either, although he sometimes makes some minor improvements. And number 6, many abusers who are not mentally ill want women to think that they are in order to avoid responsibility for their attitudes and behaviors. Substance abuse, like mental illness, he says, does not cause partner abuse, but can increase the risk of violence. Like the mentally ill abuser, the addicted abuser doesn't change unless he deals with his addiction. And even that is only the first step. And in chapter 8, he examines the role that substances play in partner abuse. The attitudes, coming down to the end, he says, the attitudes driving the mentally ill or addicted batterer are the same as those of other abusers and will likely follow the pattern of one of the 9 styles described above. And you heard all of the 9 of them. In addition, the following attitudes tend to be present. I am not responsible for my actions because of my psychological or substance problems. 2, if you challenge me about my abusiveness, you're being mean to me. Considering these are the problems I have, it also shows that you don't understand my problems. 3, I'm not abusive. I'm just alcoholic or drug addicted or maniac depressive, an adult child of alcoholics or whatever his condition might be. And lastly, if you challenge me, it will trigger my addiction or mental illness, and you will be responsible for what I do. Although I have focused on the emotionally abusive styles of these different kind of abusers, he said, any of them may also use physical violence, including sexual assault. Although the terrorist and drill sergeant are especially likely to become dangerous, they're not the only ones who may do so. Many abusers occasionally use physical violence or threats as a way to intimidate you when they feel that their power or control over you is slipping. Violence for them is kind of trump card they use when their normal patterns of psychological abuse are not getting them the degree of control they feel entitled to. If you are concerned about how dangerous your partner may be, there's a chapter in the book, chapter 6. Is he going to get violent? And then chapter 9, leaving an abuser safely. And as he ends this chapter and this section of the book, part 1, he says, key points to remember. Tremendous variation exists among abusive styles. Your abusive partner may be of a type I haven't encountered yet, but that doesn't make him any less real. Wow. That doesn't make him any less real. Many men are mixtures of different aspects. An abuser may change so much from day to day that he couldn't belong to any type. This style of abuser is so unpredictable that his partner can never make sense out of what she is living with. And finally, an abuser of any type can have days when he turns loving, attentive, and thoughtful. At these times, you may feel that his problem has finally gone away and that the relationship will return to its rosy beginning. However, abuse always comes back eventually unless the abuser has dealt with his abusiveness. This ends part 1 of our book. Why does he do that? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men by Lundy Bancroft. Part 1 of his book covered the nature of abusive thinking. We looked at the mystery, the mythology, the abusive mentality, and the types of abusive men in all 4 chapters. When we pick up back next week, God's willing, we will start on part 2, the abusive man in relationships. We're going to look at how abuse begins, the abusive man in everyday life, abusive men and sex, abusive men and addiction. And finally, in part 2, we'll be looking at the abusive man and breaking up. We have 4 parts to this book, and the journey has begun. I want to say thank you so much for coming in tonight. Thank you, Gisette, for making it in. Thanks to our Radio Garden family, TuneIn family, online radio box, Nobex Radio, YouTube, and Facebook, whatever platform you were listening in on tonight. I want to tell you thanks. I'm Dr. Monica saying, enjoy your Sabbath evening or day. God's willing, we will meet again soon. Love you lots, family. Have a great night. And I hope that you are learning on this journey. Real talk is what it is.
This song is dedicated to all women who are in abusive relationships.
Good night.
I was used and abused for so long. That's the reason I wrote this song, to let you woman know abused is not acceptable. It makes you very uncomfortable. Girl, get out.
Let me pause to just recognize some folks. I didn't know you were here. My screen didn't move and I apologize. First Lady Karen Rooms, I did say hello. My niece Veronica Wilson Kessner, I saw where you were saying you were hearing me. Thank you for coming in. Marva Glasgow says yes, very clear. Mill Boss McDonald says I love it. Thank you. I hear First Lady Karen Rooms saying that's a narcissist, hands-on. Thank you so much, Sister Daisy and Evelyn and Josette and Annabella and Norma. Thank you to everyone who came on out tonight. Nicole Williams as well. Thank you. Let me hit this one back from the top as we close. Enjoy your Friday night. Love you lots. Bye-bye.
It's all women who are in abusive relationships. They need to get out. I did. I was used and abused for so long. That's the reason I wrote this song, to let you woman know. Being abused is not acceptable. It makes you very uncomfortable. Girl, get out. He controls every move you make. How much more can you take? Girl, get out. I don't care how much you love him. You need to love yourself first. Girl, get out. I was a victim. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. I was a victim. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. You're a prisoner in your own home. You're not allowed to use the phone. Girl, leave him alone. He constantly putting you down when you try to stand tall. Girl, get out. He call you dirty names. He calls you so much pain. Girl, get out. It's a bad situation. It's manipulation. Girl, get out. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. I was a victim. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. Once bitten, twice shy. He's not a very nice guy. Girl, say bye-bye. Just leave. He tried to apologize. Don't you sympathize? Girl, get out. Look yourself in the mirror. Don't wait until tomorrow. Girl, pack your stuff and go. I don't care how much you love him. You need to love yourself first. Girl, get out. I was a victim. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. I was a victim. I was a victim. I was a victim. And I got out. I've been in an abusive relationship for years. I even lost a child in result of that. That's why I'm here to tell somebody who are in abusive relationship it's unacceptable. No one deserves to be slapped, kicked, tell what to do. Girlfriend, you can do bad all by yourself. You don't need him. Pray to God and ask him to give you strength to let go and never look back. Look in the mirror, you are beautiful.